Welcome, my name is Karen, and today I will be talking to you guys about the malaria outbreak in Italy. First, we can discuss the science about malaria to give a rough idea, and then we will move on to the bigger picture. Malaria is usually transmitted by a vector, and that vector is a mosquito. And not only is it a mosquito, it's a female mosquito, and the species is Anopheles. Malaria is a blood-borne disease. There are four types of malaria. They are Plasmodium falciparum, Plasmodium malariae, and Plasmodium vivax, and Plasmodium ovale. The deadliest one out of these is Plasmodium falciparum. So the Anopheles mosquito, like I mentioned, is a female mosquito, and it comes in and it bites you in the skin. And after it bites you in the skin, the mosquito injects the sporozoites into the host, along with the saliva of the mosquito. The sporozoites, they invade in the liver cells and they undergo schizogony, and then the liver cells rupture and release many merozoites into the blood. And when they're released into the blood, that's when you get the flu-like symptoms, which include chills, fevers, sweat, and things like that. Then the trophozoites undergo schizogony to produce more merozoites, and then those are released into the bloodstream. Malaria had a major outbreak in Italy in the 1800s and the 1900s. This disease was known as poverty as it caused so much harm to the population and the economy. There was a population of about 25 million people, and 11 were susceptible to malaria, and 2 million were infected with it and actually died, almost died. So, as science was a weak field back then, the disease studies were not complete, and when people first got malaria, one of their first symptoms was fever, and they thought that the disease was contracted through the air. They thought that the air was poisonous. They didn't know that it was transmitted through mosquitoes. And when they thought that it was from air, it was considered to be called miasma. So they thought that the gases were transferred into the air, which made the air poisonous, and people inhaled that air and they got sick from that. But they didn't know the actual cause after they did a lot of studies. And they also believed that the disease was more prevalent during like the times of dusk and dawn and in the spring and summertime. In winter, they thought that the disease was not able to get contracted because in the winter the air was more clear. So there were two theories. One was the pollutal theory and one was the telluric theory. The pollutal theory was more common in the northern areas. They thought that the malaria was caused through swamps and like stagnant water, and the telluric theory was that malaria was caused like through the earth, like the earth's soil and into the air and things like that. So there weren't any results to prove that malaria was increased in the swamps. In fact, it was the opposite because it turned out that malaria was less severe in the northern areas where the swamps actually were. When the process of the two theories did take place, it started to change expectations of epidemiology. This resulted in a change that took place by Joseph Lister, Robert Koch, and Louis Pasteur. So there was a guy named Charles Louis Alphonse, and his father was in the medical field. This guy went to school in Paris, and he went to a public health school to further his education. He was curious to study the blood of patients who were infected with malaria, and he was the one who found out that Plasmodium indeed was the bacteria or protozoa that caused malaria. And we'll get into the treatments later. But unfortunately, not only did the disease malaria infect people, but it caused a shortage in some important items such as the grain production in Italy, as it was one of the largest grain producing countries. It's hard to believe that despite having the most fertile land and being able to obtain grains efficiently, those were the places that most of the malaria disease was present. And this led to malaria ruining Italy's fertile land. Malaria was a coefficient of property, undercapitalization, and underdevelopment. It also created long-term international dependence on great industrial powers that were both healthier and more economically advanced. Also, rice fields were one of the most profitable crops in Italy. In 1886, there was a law that was called the Cantelli Law. This law listed regulations to protect the people. The Cantelli Law stated that at dawn, no one should be working outside in the rice fields, and there should be a large distance between habitats and where people work, so like the fields. And no work should carry after dusk either to reduce the causes of malaria. Twist to the story is that since the rice fields were so profitable in Italy, um, this law did not really go into effect because if it did, there would be a loss of profit. But it did take a turn in the new century. So we can talk about the treatment a little bit before I close off here. So Grassi was the one who found the drug quinine, which is found in trees like bark, and that really helped fight against malaria for those who were infected by malaria. It also helped people who, before contracting malaria, wouldn't be able to get malaria, and it also helped people who were infected with malaria get rid of the bacteria. And another thing that was also used was DDT, which is an insecticide, and this was basically getting rid of the vectors, which were the mosquitoes, and that helped reduce malaria as well.